Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted and privileged to welcome a very accomplished entrepreneur, a fellow member of the YPO from London, currently speaking to us from Ghana, Mr. Tarek Mouganie. Tarek, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ash.
Tarek is the founder of Affinity, which is the full-fledged digitally driven bank that provides fair and accessible financial services to the underserved and unbanked. He's the director of the MAN Group, which is GLG Partners. Tarek began his career as an academic at the University of Cambridge, where he obtained his PhD in physics at the age of 22. Wow. Tarek has been recognized, awarded, and felicitated globally. And as I just mentioned, he's a member of the YPO. So, Tarek, before we start talking about financial services and fintech, tell me about your own journey.
Sure, absolutely happy to. So I'm actually from Ghana. I only just got my naturalization in the UK about 15 years ago. So I'm from an immigrant family, Lebanese of origin, but I'm fourth generation Ghanaian. I grew up in a town, not in the capital, in Accra, which is where I am at the moment, but in a town called Kumasi. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. So they raised some eyebrows when I told them I was going to be an academic. They were like, what do you mean be an academic? Surely you're going to start your own business like everyone else in the family. Yeah. So I always sort of had that blood in me. But it also comes very tempered with the idea and the notion that I am very lucky because I came from a very strong family of entrepreneurs. They were able to send me to the UK to study. I only got into Cambridge, not just obviously for my own accolades, but because I had a support network and a strong family that enabled me to get there. And as a result, it's distilled an immense amount of like a want or a need or a hunger to sort of give back and to support others as well too. And everything that I've done in my career, whether it's focused around artists or athletes or now with Affinity and entrepreneurs, it's always been centered around those values that my family, kind of gave me or distilled in me growing up.
How fascinating. And you're very, very modest when you say, everything happened because of the network that you had. I don't know anyone who's got a PhD at 22. But let's talk, Tarek, about Affinity.
Sure.
Tell me about this venture and what was your motivation to start this?
So I'm going to go back to the dinosaurs. I hope you don't mind, Ash. So I moved to the UK when I was 12. I skipped a couple of years at school. So I actually started quite early. And I was very lucky because I was quite a tenacious child. My parents were never those sort of family members that told me what to do. They just enabled me. Whatever I wanted to do, they just fueled it. They were like, the sky's the limit. You can be an artist, an athlete. We don't really care as long as you're happy. So as a result, I was in sort of hyperdrive. I was more, give me. I want to study. I want to learn. I want to understand. I would try things, fail at them, and move on to other things as well too. So I ended up basically in an academic position, initially at Imperial College, where I did my engineering degree, and then my PhD in physics at Cambridge. I sort of graduated, looked around, and thought to myself, there are a whole bunch of people who have a similar background to me, maybe a bit older, as you said, but at least they do have the same background to me. I kind of want to do something that's a bit different. And I had two friends at university that were studying international development. And they kind of distilled that idea in my head that you can create a business like your parents did. You can make money and be successful in that way as well, too. But at the same time, you can have an immense amount of impact. So that seed was planted quite early in my career. I ended up working at a hedge fund. As you mentioned, I was a director at GLG, MAN Group, the second largest hedge fund in Europe, and now the second largest in the world. I focused on financial institutions simply because of the sort of financial crisis that happened. And I ended up in a role managing a portfolio investing in banks, banks in India, banks in Mexico, banks in other parts of the world as well, too. And there was a light bulb moment which sort of thought to me that occurred to me that if I went back to Ghana and created a social business, which is what Affinity is, it's a for-profit but has huge social implications, I can sort of have my cake and eat it too. I can do something that'll make me rich in the future, but at the same time, I can also do something that I'm proud of and actually support entrepreneurs. So that's how the idea of Affinity came to be. So I moved back to Ghana, did quite a lot of research and realized that there are two sort of massive facts and figures that a lot of people sort of still quote to this day. First, looking at sub-Saharan Africa, which is obviously quite a large continent, there are 400 million adults on our continent in sub-Saharan Africa that do not have a bank account. Think about that. It's unbelievable. It's over 60% of the adult population.
Wow.
Secondly, there is a lending opportunity for small businesses of $330 billion.
Wow.
And looking at those numbers, if you translate them just in Ghana, which is where we've launched our business for now, that's 11 million adults in Ghana that don't have a bank account. And it's a lending opportunity of about $10 billion. It's massive.
Yep.
It's absolutely massive. Just by going into that demographic, you're actually growing the pie by 3 times. It's
correct. And,
so
and enabling.
Yeah.
And enabling so many, 11 million more people to do what they want to do, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the idea of Affinity started off as building a bank for the people. And as you mentioned early on, it is a full-fledged bank. So traditionally with neobanks, what ends up happening is you provide basically one channel and one product. We did the crazy thing in the last 4 years of building something that does everything, which is a full-fledged bank. So we provide current accounts, savings products, and investment products, and we provide loans to individuals and small businesses across 2 different channels. And it came through many iterations, a team that has spent 4 years developing and understanding that target demographic. And we've seen the results over the last few months of some incredible traction within the business itself as well, too.
This is such a powerful thing that you are doing. We saw this happen in India 8 years ago or 9 years ago, when our Prime Minister in his very first year came and said that he wanted every single household to have a bank account. And he gave instructions to the government and banks that in 6 months he wanted it done, and people said it's impossible. But today, nobody's transacting in cash, or very, very few people are transacting in cash. So that's amazing what you're doing. But tell me now, Tarek, based on all the work that you've been doing, what are some of the challenges the underserved and the unbanked face?
It's a very good question. And for us to succeed, so we're a private venture, we're backed by VCs, and it does have social implications, but we are a commercial venture. For us to succeed in what we do, there needs to be an entire ecosystem that supports us. So if you look at the continent itself, about 86% of the population is informal. It's a similar situation in India, as you rightly pointed out.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? These are people who are unregistered, who don't necessarily have formal IDs. There's no address system. The infrastructure is pretty poor, and then the regulation is quite difficult. It's not something that Affinity needs to solve, right? In order for us to be empowered, in order for us to provide our products, what's very important is that these systems exist. Historically, that's not been the case. The numbers that I gave you around 400 million adults and 330 billion lending gap, these are numbers I've given you that have been quoted since 2012, and they still exist to this day, 11 years later.
Okay.
So the good news is what we ended up doing by understanding all that at Affinity, we've actually had to build the ecosystem ourselves, and we've used that technology. And that's the wonderful thing that we've been doing over the last 4 years in terms of building our digital channels and testing it all out. So we turned those challenges into an opportunity, and the traction has shown that as well too.
And when you do something at such a large scale, there's an example available in Bangladesh about how the Grameen Bank changed everything, and you seem to be doing something very similar. How much of the support is required from the government?
So it is required. It is important. We have had some support from the government. And I'll give you one example. A few years ago, actually about 10 years ago, the regulator basically said, we're not open to new business and we're not providing new banking licenses. Because of what we do, because what we do is so important, because the biggest drivers of socioeconomic growth are SMEs, and that's what we support, SMEs and their employees.
Yeah.
We've spent the last sort of 3 years lobbying with the government, aligning our values with them. And as a result, they gave us our license March last year. And they made an exception because what we're trying to do aligns with the mission of the government of Ghana. Whether it's this current leadership or the previous leadership or the future leadership, all heads of states, all leaders basically within any economy always want to support financial inclusion and SMEs as well too. Because you create employment through that, you improve the revenue streams that governments have, through taxation as well too. And so that was sort of the biggest sort of breakthrough for us and support with them.
Mm.
And at the moment, we have a very strong relationship with the regulator. We have record speeds when it comes to approvals of our products and our channels.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been moving and getting quite a lot of traction from them. And we're very, very happy about that. Aligning yourself to the regulator and working alongside them is very important.
Wonderful. And when I was reading about you, you're also working on supporting the UN Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah.
Which of the goals are you working on through Affinity?
It's a very good question, and it could actually be all of them because we are a bank at the end of the day. But let me kind of break them down into two categories. First is directly, what are we doing to support the SDGs? And it's about 5. I would say gender is the first one. So what we realized as we were doing all our studies as Affinity is there was a huge distrust from women when it came to financial services, digital financial services, because they needed physical touch points in order for them to bank, because it transpired that women don't take risk. So 90% of clients of digital-only financial institutions were actually men. For us, we launched our product in October, our agency platform in October. We have over 10,000 customers who have 22,000 accounts with us, and 62% of them are women, which is pretty amazing. So directly, gender has been a very important role for us, and we're about to announce a partnership with the UK government around financial inclusion for women as well too. So super excited about that. The second is no poverty. So there are huge effects when it comes to supporting small businesses, especially micro enterprises. We've seen elements of businesses that we've supported where, in this case, a female entrepreneur, Lizzie, went from having 2 employees to 11 employees, and she grew her revenue by 5 times. So just imagine the implications around no poverty there.
Yeah.
The second is decent work conditions, and also providing social inclusion in that sense as well too, and employment. That example with Lizzie as well too pertains. Reduced inequality and economic growth. So those are sort of the 5 pillars that we directly have an impact on. Indirectly, as an enabler, as a bank that has an enabler, and as you're creating those sort of 5 elements that we discussed earlier on, you're having an improvement with education, because a woman like Lizzie can help better educate her kids. You have an implication around health and healthcare. We do want to release health insurance products via our channels as well too, and we're speaking to a South African fintech on that. Zero hunger, industrial innovation, and also building resilient economies in cities.
Absolutely.
Because if you're supporting SMEs, you're supporting the biggest driver of social income growth. Let me give you an example of that, because I'm a numbers person. If you look at an economy, an OECD economy, or any country in the global north, like the UK, 47% of government revenue comes from SMEs in the UK. So these are SMEs that are paying corporate taxes, VAT, who are generating income from their employees as well too, personal tax income from their employees. If you look at a country like Ghana, it's less than 10% of government revenue. So just by actually growing that SME bracket, which is what we're doing at Affinity, you can actually grow that income basically for government, which is why it's such a crucial and important thing to do and to align yourself with.
Amazing. And it's often been said that if you educate or empower a woman, you educate and empower a whole family. And I think what you're doing is so amazing. More power to you, Tarek. Tell me also that, you're currently focused in Ghana. Are you planning to go into other parts of Western Africa or other parts of Africa?
Absolutely. So, in fact, actually, we just hired someone to run the Ghana operations. I've been promoted to the head of Africa. At the moment, we just have one Ghanaian operation, but the idea is towards the end of this year, beginning of next year, start exploring new opportunities outside of Ghana. And the problem that we're solving for, as I mentioned, exists across all of sub-Saharan Africa. There are 2 key countries that are very important to us because of their size. That's Nigeria and Kenya. We don't know if it'll be the second phase of our growth, but there are some other countries that are comparable to Ghana in Southern Africa, and Western Africa, and Eastern Africa as well too, that we're exploring in the shorter term. But absolutely.
Amazing. Let me now move on and ask you a few other things. That when you talk of digital bank or a digital access to so many different people, how are you seeing the digital revolution bringing about financial inclusion for the unbanked?
It's a very good question. I can probably spend an hour talking about that. So I'm gonna break this answer down into two parts. So I'm gonna look at digital banking in the global north, and I want to look at digital banking basically in Africa, because what we build at Affinity is an African solution to an African problem, and that's something we take pride in as well too. It's very important. So if you take a look at all the digital banks that exist in the global north, they're predominantly for digital natives. So people who have a bank account, but maybe do not appreciate the experience that they have, the customer journey that they have from their bank. So as a result, they open a secondary bank account. I think it's less than 10% of digital bank holders use their accounts as primary bank accounts. We're looking at obviously all the big players in the global north as well too. That is a valid business model, because the digital natives that exist in the global north is a pretty large proportion of the population. If you take a look at that in the context of Africa, it's only about 12% of the population, because you're looking at individuals that are young, which is the large proportion of the economy, that have smartphones, that have access to the Apple or Google store, that can afford data, and very importantly, that can prioritize data as well too. So, and they're digital natives, so technologically and financially literate. It's actually only 12% of the adult population. So what we've had to do is we've built that channel, but what we also did is we built an entire digital platform that does offline digital sales. And it's an agency platform. And that sort of serves 86% of the population. So the biggest stat that I always tell people when we look at us, we are a fast growing young company. We have over 10,000 customers, as I mentioned to you. The staggering thing to note is that 87% of our customers use us as their primary bank account.
Wow.
And that's such a key target for us. So now leading on to the second element in terms of financial inclusion and using digital services. We work alongside one of the biggest sort of drivers of financial inclusion on our continent, something that I'm sure you've heard of, which is mobile money. So, we've had the example of M-Pesa, which has been an incredible driving force basically on our continent, using a very old-fashioned technology, which is USSD, something that's sort of a bit outdated, that's still very powerful on our continent, So we should also understand what the customer does, how the customer deals with financial services and technology, and build for them, So we adopted that sort of strategy on the customer journey side. The thing that mobile money does, and the thing that a lot of the sort of fintechs do on the continent, is they solve one element of financial inclusion, and that's accessibility, making it easy for the customer to get that product, which is a very important pillar when it comes to financial inclusion. At Affinity, we actually take it 2 steps further. We look at affordability as well too. So if you look at a traditional bank account in Ghana, the average monthly fee is $5. At Affinity, we have no monthly charges. It's 0. So we have no monthly fee. Our transaction charges for existing players in the market are quite high, because that's how they generate their revenue. For us, we're 90% cheaper. And then the third thing that we do is we actually provide interest on all accounts. So we provide interest on current accounts, savings products, and investment products. Traditionally, with banks and mobile money, you get 0% interest on your current account. So we take it a step further with affordability. And then the third pillar that we've also looked on is actually literacy. So you'll remember the point that I made earlier on. We understand our customer. We communicate very clearly with them in terms of how we operate, what the terms and conditions are. It's a very important way of fostering trust with them. The second thing as well, too, is we understand how they've dealt with financial services and digital services, and we've built for them. And that's why we've had success when it comes to women, because we understand how they deal with these services and platforms. And we've designed our customer journey and our user interface and our user experience with them in mind as well, too. And so the last stat I want to leave you with, if you don't mind, because it's something that we're also quite proud of, is if you look at the average deposit balance for mobile money in Ghana, it's about $23. If you look at the average deposit balance for retail customers in banks, it's $86. At Affinity, even though people think we bank the poor, which we don't, by the way, we bank the unbanked and the underserved who have a lot of cash and nowhere to put it. Our average deposit balance is $245. That's over 4 times that of traditional banks and over 10 times that of mobile money as well, too.
Amazing. And just as an aside, I wanted to ask you that, all the work that you're doing needs a very, very robust and deeply penetrated mobile usage base. How large is it in Ghana?
So mobile penetration is over 100%.
Okay.
So which basically means the average adult has more than one mobile phone, right?
Yeah.
So what will happen is, depending on which carrier you use, you'll transfer money or call someone on that. It's still sort of the UK in the 90s.
Okay.
So our channels are based on two fronts. For those that are digital natives, so it's the 12% of the population target, and those are for people with smartphones and can afford data, etc. About 60% of Ghanaians have smartphones. The second is our agency platform. So we have an agency app that our agents go into the market with. They onboard, it's last mile banking. They onboard customers, but then the customer then transacts using USSD channel that we've built as well too. So for that, it serves 100% of mobile phone users, because depending on if you have a smartphone or a feature phone, you can still bank with us as well too.
There's another area that we have seen in India, which seems to just taken off, and that's from a government perspective, given that what you're creating is exactly what India created a few years ago, is the whole concept of the direct benefit transfer. Whenever the government wants to transfer any money to farmers or to the poor, it just goes out in a few seconds to every person's bank account. Are you also looking at something similar?
I think eventually we are, but let me give you an example that sort of I think we're maybe 10 years before the cycle in India. And what's very evident from this conversation, Ash, is I need to come visit you and spend some time.
Oh, you must, absolutely.
And understand how we can lift some of those ideas over, especially dealing with policy and working with government alongside our mission. But let me give you an example that's sort of a direct comparison there. If I wanted an insurance product here in Ghana, because collections is a very difficult thing, 90% of transactions in Ghana are cash-based, which is ridiculous, and we're solving for that as well too at Affinity, given the fact that we are a digital bank. So if I want to apply for an insurance product, I go to an insurance company and it's, let's say, health insurance. I have to pay my health premium, my insurance premium, 1 year upfront.
Wow.
It's insane, because there's no direct debit mechanism basically from banks. So as an API-driven business, we're now partnering with financial institutions and insurance companies. And what we're telling them is, you work with us, you can direct debit basically off of the platform from our customers. And it improves affordability for our customer as well too. And it's a similar thing that we can do with dealing with governments, with APIs. So if there are any sort of like schemes that they provide basically for farmers, etc., they can use us as a platform basically to disperse. And we can do it either at the Affinity level into Affinity wallets, or via their mobile wallets as well too, because we have full interoperability on our platform.
Amazing. So time for 2 more questions for you. My next question is that, given the amount of work that you are doing, do you see Ghana and Africa moving more and more towards a cashless economy?
It has to. There is no choice. Cash is expensive. It creates fraud as well too, and it really must move forward like that. We've seen it happen in the rest of the world. The bricks and mortar element has reduced. It improves on operational costs. It reduces operational costs for financial institutions, which also means that products are more affordable. So unfortunately, Ash, the answer is yes, and we have to as well. We just need to do it quicker.
That's fantastic. And my last question, Tarek, and this is for the thousands of people who will listen to our conversation around the world. Based on your own amazing journey, and so much success at such a young age, what would you say are 3 lessons you would want our very young viewers and listeners to take away from your own journey and from our conversation?
It's a very good question. I think first and foremost, this is something that I've learned over time. My biggest breakthrough moment was actually last year. So I was very lucky to be nominated into a Tutu fellowship. So the Archbishop has a fellowship program, and I went through a leadership development program for a few months last year, and it was really quite enlightening. I think first and foremost is define what your values are, understand what your leadership skills are as well too, whether you're a thought leader, a process leader, or a people leader. Secondly, understand how you can bring people along with you on that journey, because you can't do it alone. I've made several mistakes in the past. I failed a lot of times. I come from a family of entrepreneurs who exhibit a lot of grit and tenacity, which is what it takes to be an entrepreneur, because you'll hear no on a daily basis. Despite all this traction that I've had, I still get rejected on a daily basis from people who should be supporting me. Correct. But you wipe yourself up, when you fall, and you stand up and you move. and you talk about what you stand for as a business and as an individual, and people listen and are inspired by that will follow you as well too. And then they will leave you and start their own businesses and have that effect. So I think maybe just to sort of kind of distill those sort of three learnings, first and foremost, listen. It's very important, and people want to help. So listen. Second, be agile. You will fail, learn and move quickly. And then the third thing, which is sort of what I'm learning now, is stakeholder management. I have a board that I need to learn and speak to. I have investors that I need to learn and speak to. I have a team that I need to learn and speak to. I have a regulator that I need to learn and speak to. And of course, I have customers that I need to learn and speak to. And that's something that's very important as well to understand.
Wonderful. And on that note, Tarek, and your amazing lessons, define your values, understand your leadership skills. It's important to carry your people along the journey and talk about what you stand for. And the three words that you, of course, gave was listen, be agile, and learn and understand how to learn and speak to people, which means maybe get older management. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your incredible journey. Thank you for talking to me about Affinity. I look forward and I will applaud from the sidelines the incredible success that I'm sure I will continue to see of Affinity, not just in Ghana, but in all of Africa and maybe all of the world. Thank you also for speaking to me about so much work that is being done in the area of digital banking and how Affinity and all your colleagues and teams members are doing so much wonderful work for the underserved and the unbanked. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website, www.tbcy.in, to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.